Okay, so let's get started. It's 7 a.m. in Tokyo, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Daylight Time, and I think it is 3 p.m. in Pacific Time. Again, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining our panel discussion today, titled Brave New World, Challenges from the East, Asia Biopharma in Response to COVID-19. Today we'll touch on a variety of topics, including how COVID-19 impacted business development activities in Asia biopharmaceutical companies. And first of all, I'd like to appreciate CBC Group, Goodwin, and Santen Pharmaceuticals for joining this panel, and I hope we have a fruitful discussion. Just real quick before we start, I've been receiving a number of questions, especially from US and European biotechs quite frequently about what the market environment and business development situation in Asia is post-COVID, when this pandemic started. And as Locust Walk, we're quite deeply rooted in Asia and in this region, and thought we should shed some light on that. And things are getting more uncertain these days, and this time was only for Japan, but we did a quick survey reaching out to like nearly 200 business development professionals in Japan, and asked what the impact was on COVID-19 on the business development activities. Unfortunately, I couldn't reach out to Chinese colleagues, but we also released a white paper on that, and I think we won't dive into the details, but this was the background for today's webinar. And so, we have 1 hour allotted for this panel, including questions that I think we may have received prior to this session. And also, if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A system, and I can see them live popping up on my prompt. If we don't have time to address your questions, we'll follow up separately with our thoughts. And again, we will be recording this session, and a playback will be available shortly after for people who couldn't join. And I'm also obliged to share that due to confidentiality obligations and other regulatory requirements, we will not address questions specific to any one company. And this is also not considered legal advice or the offer to buy or sell any securities. And again, everything discussed is off the record and for everybody's information only. So without much ado, I'd like to start today's discussion by introducing our panel. Today we have Wendy Pan, is a partner at Goodwin's Technology and Life Sciences Group, focusing on mergers and acquisitions, technology-based transactions, strategic partnerships, and financing transactions, especially in the life science and technology industries and in cross-border settings. She's based both in Hong Kong and in New York. And she has deep experience in representing licensors as well as licensees involving a broad spectrum of technologies, and she's dedicated to life sciences right now. Next, I'd like to introduce Mr. Ken Araki. He's Corporate Director and Global Head of Business Development at Santen Pharmaceutical. Santen, as we all know, was established in 1890 and focuses in ophthalmic field with direct commercial presence in 45 or more countries around the world. Ken is managing Santen's global business development activities, including M&A, product licensing, discovery, research collaboration, local commercial stage transactions, and corporate venture capital investment. Prior to Santen, Ken was at Takeda and also at Nomura Securities. So he has a vast range of experience, both in the M&A, licensing, and business and corporate development world. And Dr. Sean Kao is currently the managing director of CBC Group, formerly, I'm sure some of you folks know that, Seabridge Capital, one of the largest and most active healthcare dedicated investment firms in Asia, where he focuses on the incubation and strategy of new companies. He's also a founder and CEO of Everest Medicines, a biopharma company focused on developing innovative therapeutics in China and other regions. Prior to CBC Group, he was at Simcere, a Chinese pharmaceutical group, and before Simcere, he held various positions at global pharma, VC, and diagnostic companies. And last but not least, again, I'm Hayato Watanabe, and I'm Senior Vice President, head of Asia at Locust Walk, and I would be, it's my pleasure to again welcome these participants to today's panel. So, COVID-19 and the lockdown. It's been a real quick or short. You know how maybe it could have been long for some of us. But as an open remark from each of you, how do you feel this impacted, business development in Asia? Well, not only Asia, but maybe, cross-border deal making. I think things going remote were the foremost impact, but I guess in our industry, it has been, quite well received. But let's start off with Wendy. How do you observe these couple of crazy 4 months?
Yes, actually, for people who focus on.
Oops. Okay. Seems like Wendy lost connect. Oh, here we go.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay, I'm back. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Starting from February, it's 5 months now. It's quite long. 5 months. And I would say we have kind of experienced the initial panic from clients, from everybody. It was like, okay, China is shut down. Then China is back, and now, like the US, everywhere is affected by the pandemic. But gradually, actually, what I noticed that is people have already got into the new mood of doing business, and also because there's nothing else you could do when you cannot go outside and meet two people or work in a lab. I found deal making is more active than before. So if you want me to summarize the experience in the past few months, it's like busy. We are extremely busy. Inbound, outbound, licensor side, licensee side. And it seems, like the pandemic has not slowed down the deal flow at all. It might have slowed down a little bit, but then it's more than compensated by COVID-19 related work.
Interesting. How do you see things, Ken?
Yeah, so let's say in terms of Santen's case and some of the Japanese pharma companies the same, we spent a lot of a remote situation. Obviously, we did continue the discussion with partner, performing the due diligence. At least discussion, negotiation, due diligence, it doesn't seem to be no problem to do remotely. So then, however, I think the long-term perspective is a little bit the issue, because still in-person communication is very important. No problem at all to talk and chat with the person who knows well. However, a challenging component is build a new relationship by online or remotely only. The business development work is, having the meal, doing together, and then very important for us. We know individual personality to talk about the family, friend, such ample time. However, now completely we miss the chance. The short term, I don't think it's an issue. Discussion, negotiation, due diligence. However, from long-term perspective, is a little bit slow down to expand new network. That's my view.
Very interesting. Sean, how do you see, how do you comment on Ken's thinking there? I mean, maybe short term, you can be comfortably doing business, but in long term, how can we kind of overcome this just virtual meetings?
Yeah, so I think I really, I would really would like to echo what Ken just said, and in terms of short term versus long term. I think long term, you can see it will be an issue eventually, because our BD business is a people business. Without getting to meet each other, without, I think it's funny because if you think about it, COVID-19 started after JP Morgan, when people really get tired of JP Morgan. I'm pretty sure a lot of people now miss JP Morgan already. Usually people in your field, they're never looking forward to JP Morgan, but I think this is a case where you can tell. I know many of my colleagues like, wow, I miss those days actually. But in the short term, I do agree with Wendy and the Ken. Just actually, we are not slowing down at all in terms of due diligence, deal execution. I can tell you some numbers. So when I was at Everest, we did I think 3 to 4 deals, about 3 to 4 deals a year. And this year, we're only happy. We only finished the first half with two other CBC companies. Already completed 3 deals. 2 are in the US, another between US and China. So in terms of deal execution, we're definitely not slowing down. We actually just executed another term sheet for the 4th deal. So I think we, in a way, actually people found it. The team actually found more productive because you cut a lot of time out of the travel, and you can be more focused on deal execution, deal evaluation. So I think short term it's I didn't see any slowing down. Actually, in a way, it's actually more productive. But longer term, I do worry that the deal source will dry up if there's no new network, no connection.
Yeah. So just to reinforce Sean's comment, and also Wendy, your comment about being very, very busy. I think I kind of stopped her talking right now, but just some data points. Actually, for first quarter 2020, the deal volume for Japan, this is inbound and a little bit of outbound as well, but it actually increased twofold compared to last year. And also, China's seen almost a 20% growth in deal volume. And just this morning, I saw a news feed saying that second quarter for China-related deals, the value was surpassing $3 billion. So you don't see any slowing down here. And you were about to say, Wendy?
Yeah, I was going to say, to deal with the new challenge imposed by the travel restrictions, I think all of us need to be open-minded and need to be innovative and open to new ideas. For example, like today we are having webinar. We may need to modify or replace with some old practice. For example, like on-site DD. This morning I was, I had to deal with some urgent client phone call because the other side said you have to come to our, to our office to view the documents. And because of a travel restriction, even we can travel to that place, we will need to be quarantined for 14 days. That's impractical. So I think everybody needs to be more flexible on some of the old rules. And the other point I want to make is, before we find another way to establish person-to-person contact, or go back to the old world, I think working with intermediaries such as Locust work would be very, very helpful. For people who have not established the business connections or who have run out of the business connections, going to professional people like Locust work. You guys, you have a institutional reputation there, and also you have a much deeper Rolodex. And to ask you guys to help to facilitate the relationship building would be very useful way.
And for the listeners out there today, I am not paying Wendy anything about the intermediary. That's a great point. And actually, I have some questions coming out from the floor or virtually. And one question I had was, it's exactly around deal sourcing. And if conferences, we won't be able to go to them. I mean, there are virtual conferences, but if there aren't going to be in person, Do you think it's going to be as productive, or how should people think about sourcing going forward?
Maybe I'll kick off. So I think still conference partnering meeting is pretty much important for our business development professional. However, still US, European conference partnering is extremely important for our Japanese company. So obviously we can utilize a webinar or virtual, technology, whatever. However, still challenging component is a time difference. So 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. United States, Europe is a quite challenging time zone for our Asian companies. So now in the case of Santen, we need to heavily rely on our US colleague or European colleague to still virtually, however, to leverage the same time zone to, chat with people or sees something. So it's very difficult for our Japanese colleague to participate lively such kind of activity. It's if this situation will continue to next maybe 12 months, 18 months, it's much more difficult for us.
Sean, you have any thoughts around the sourcing?
Yeah, I think so. I remember I think it was Bio Europe. They had a virtual meeting, and I did not attend, but one of my colleagues attended, and it is sort of productive. He managed to get a lot of meetings out of it. Unfortunately, I think it was just at the beginning of the pandemic, and most of the senior BD people did not actually attend. So I'm sure moving forward, if more senior people attend those meetings, I think most likely more productive deal sourcing came out of those, and people getting used to it. And yeah, and then webinars, right, and those places, and also another, and a lot of time deal sourcing involves multiple contact points, and probably now is a good time to dig out the Rolodex and send an email that maybe some companies you met briefly a year ago to check on the progress by email. I think it's almost like freshman year in high school, right? It's all about who makes the first move. Yeah, in a very very unfamiliar situation. I'm sure people always want to reach out and to be in contact. Just be creative and figure out what is the best way to initiate contacts.
No, I can't agree more, and I think we got to be creative. And if I think it's not going to be forever, but just that last meeting face to face would just seal things. But until then, I think what I'm hearing is that we can be creative, pinging people that we've only met once or have a card, and I think that would start. I also have another question from the participants today, and I think it's quite relevant. Wendy, and so you were just talking about a little bit on on-site diligence, and one of the questions I have right now is that because if we are foregoing on-site diligence, right? So does that mean that there is potentially more risk acceptance, especially if the deal flow is not slowing down? I mean, in terms of kind of putting in that, maybe put your lawyer's hat for a moment now and say, would some terms become, especially like indemnities and things like that, would that change, or do you think it would not much affect?
Well, like in our industry, and what the on-site due diligence would achieve, if we are working on a manufacturing deal, whether investment or M&A deals involving a manufacturing facility, on-site due diligence is important. But as to everything else, I just feel like in our industry, it's replaceable. In terms of, if you are going to in-licensing a clinical program, and the most important parts would be IP. like IP due diligence is done on paper, right? Virtually, anyways. And the other part, like due diligence will be clinical data. You will look at the data. You may, reach out to investigators. But on-site DD is not that crucial. That's why I just said, in the past, for some important agreements, you don't want to share it with third party, with the investor until, right before the closing or the signing of the term sheet. Now you may need to find some creative ways or relax your practice.
So it's a very funny story. Completely agree with Wendy. I think the manufacturing component, most key product, some case we need to on-site due diligence, how we can overcome that. So one of the idea we chat with somebody, okay, we will take the picture and send the picture to us. I'm not sure this is a really creative idea or not, but so obviously manufacturing component is, key area we need to consider something.
Or you can have someone holding the iPad,
right,
like
video.
Yeah.
Interesting. A little bit back on the effect on COVID-19. I'm sure, so we're seeing very active deal activities, and I think it's all good. But for example, Ken, when you closed a deal in May, in licensing an asset from J-Side, I recall. Did you ever think twice about kind of pausing this deal when you were in negotiations? When the pandemic broke out?
It was pretty much up to speed. The fortunate component for us, we almost completed diligence before COVID-19 situation. So just on the final negotiation discussion only should be the main component during the COVID-19. So as I said at the beginning of this forum, negotiation discussions are completely no problem to perform remotely.
I see. Wendy, has any of your clients, be it Chinese companies or U.S. companies, kind of wanted to put it on pause for a moment because they didn't know what was going on, or at least wanted some time to see what may happen, or did they just keep going?
I would say there were two camps of companies, and majority companies, and after the initial pause, and actually now I'm moving full speed or even faster. To a large extent is fueled by the very active capital market in China. You probably have heard, biotech IPOs, Chinese biotech companies IPOs on NASDAQ and on Hong Kong Stock Exchange, and also on Chinese Star Board. So everybody is actually, trying to get deals done and trying to get ready for the IPOs. There were a small group of deals which were affected. To some extent, it was by COVID-19, but I think mostly it's because of some issues inherently to the deals. So the answer is no, not really. No.
Not really. Yeah, we hosted a capital markets webinar in mid-June, and just discussing about how active the capital markets is and are still. And I think not only the public markets, but Sean, I mean, Everest did a whopping $310 million Series C. Did you expect that coming, or do you think you could have raised more?
No, it's something that we've been working on for a while. So it just happened. The closing will fell into this period of time. I think by the time the pandemic started, most of the investors already did a very thorough due diligence of the company. But on the other hand, I did not. So we as I mentioned, I've been working with a few other CBC portfolio companies to work on deals, and I didn't see any slowing down at all in terms of our partners, whether they want to pause or on either side of the because I did actually some licensing out and licensing in, so none of those. I don't think anybody even give a thought that, oh, maybe we should slow down. No, not at all.
Yeah, I think in general, because our industry, the healthcare industry, is so linked to finding innovative solutions and actually understand what's going on in this pandemic. I think we're one of the more fortunate sectors that it's not that we're taking advantage. I mean, I think we can use this as a tailwind to find new vaccines. And I think your comment earlier, Wendy, about COVID-19 related BD activities. I mean, now on newsfeed, you see COVID-related and non-COVID related deal activity being announced almost every day. So I think the other fact, I think, fostering such activity is the capital markets. But from a public company perspective, Ken, is there any kind of change in terms of how Santen, for example, is going to, is it going to be reserving cash for R&D spend or for deal spend, or it's no change at all?
So fortunately, in the case of Santen, as Hayato mentioned, we are a publicly traded company. It's a 7 billion market cap. It's several hundred million cash in hand. It's a cash reserve spending perspective, completely no problem. However, the partnering perspectives, we may see some positive impact for pharma side because some of the small biotech company obviously face some challenging to raise capital money. So before COVID-19, some cases, such a small biotech company, okay, we'd like to develop my product program all over the world. We have enough cash. However, during or after COVID-19, some case we see, they cannot raise enough money. Therefore, they pretty much focus on their core territory like United States, but ex-United States or like Asia territory, they seems to be much more flexible to partner with a pharma company like us. So to obtain upfront milestones, they would like to utilize the money to their own development in core territory. So maybe short term, that's slightly positive for our pharma company.
Interesting. I think that's a very interesting point because if the capital markets and fundraising situation is positive for many companies, then, and in fact, you may not need to go after non-dilutive financing in terms of getting deals done and going after upfront and having your partner take care of the development costs in other regions. But yes, so I guess in that sense, we all are experiencing some interesting times indeed. I have another question that come up, and we slightly touched upon this, but I think, like Ken, you mentioned earlier that it's very hard for us to, like for Asian participants to join in on like a conference or virtual conference going on on the East Coast. We got to stay up all night, or if you have colleagues in the U.S., then it's great. But when do you think we can start going back to physically attending? I also get questions about would there be a virtual JP Morgan or JP Morgan at all next year? And what do you think, Wendy? What's your take?
Actually, internally, our life sciences practice business unit conducted a survey. Like each year, normally we have hundreds of like partners attending JP Morgan. I don't know the exact number. I think it was like a huge number of partners. So this year, and I had to confess, I said no, because before the vaccine comes out, I probably won't feel comfortable to go out. Yeah. On the other hand, I felt like apart from the face-to-face personal contact, in a way, I felt the virtual conferences, especially the acceptance of Zoom meetings by the general business community, in a way, helped Asian companies because now you don't need to travel. And still, you can participate in the virtual meetings, just like U.S. companies with U.S. companies, and as long as you don't mind working, weird hours. But to me, I would take it, because compared to the 14 hours, 18 hours of international travel, staying up late a few times, it's not too bad.
Ken, your thoughts about physical attendance, and I think JP Morgan again would be like one big kind of milestone.
Yeah. So in terms of this calendar year, 2020, I'm very much pessimistic to reopen some, physical conference or something. Now, however, as Hayato mentioned, January 2021, JP Morgan conference, extremely interesting key milestone. Everything is go back or still not yet. So I sincerely hope they go back to the normal January next year. But frankly speaking, I'm not sure. So as I told you at the beginning, still in-person connection is very much important. And then JP Morgan's case is easy to reconnect newly contact with the person. So on the street, we can meet, hey guys, how are you? So much effective. So even if just 15 minutes, 20 minute chat, that's a great opportunity to catch up. So if we try to set up every, Zoom, Skype, team call just only on behalf of 15-minute chat, it's quite challenging. So my personal opinion is, hopefully JP Morgan next year will be, key milestone to go back normal.
Sean, you think the vaccines is one kind of checkpoint that make people want to go back out on the streets again?
I think that's at least, I think it sounds like this is the mentality of a lot of people. They won't feel comfortable in big gathering without a vaccine, and we all know that it's hard to predict, and I don't have a crystal ball, so it's really difficult for me to predict what's going to happen to the vaccine and to the virus in the next half a year. On the other hand, I do have faith in technology, and if you tell me 4 months before now that we're all going to be sit at home, work from home, and have video conference for 4 months without traveling, I would and also get a lot of things done, I would tell you you're nuts. But it happened, and
Yes.
And the people are getting better and better in terms of figure out a way to get connected, and my background for my Zoom meeting is getting better by the day, and and so I think I'm optimistic. I think even if we have to stay put for a while, I think technology will find its way, and to make sure people can get connected. I'm not sure it will to the extent like JP Morgan, where you can just grab someone on the street and talk for 5 minutes. But I think we will get better. I'm optimistic.
Right. And I just got a question asking, so would JP Morgan next year mean longer impact to deal flow? I guess our answer to that is maybe no, maybe yes, but so far I think we're all being very trying to do as much as we can within the limited sources, and I think we are getting good at it for sure. So do you have any other thoughts around that, Wendy?
I think, and yeah, we just need to be creative, be open-minded. Yes, it's true. It's so much easier to grab somebody on the street at JP Morgan in San Francisco. But now, watch industry news and watch news posts on LinkedIn from your friends. And if you heard something, like post something, and send out the email, send out the chat, say, congratulations, I would like to catch up, right? And that's kind of equivalent to a coffee meeting, right? And yeah, you just need to be creative. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. Just maybe this is a little bit around COVID-19, but in terms of business, like deal activities, number of companies are saying, okay, COVID-19 is a bit special. It's not going to be a typical sort of alliance or licensing deal. How do you see COVID-19 related deals, affecting the other kind of, or taking some companies' attention away from the deals that should have been done? Do you see anything like that happening? Like Sean, for example, when you're talking to a company and all of a sudden, they shift gears and say, oh, we're only doing COVID-19 right now, and you were talking about a totally different oncology product. Has that happened to you?
Not quite. I do see, not to the companies I'm involved, but I do see a lot of opportunities involved with COVID-19. For example, you see more drugs are definitely hundreds of drugs have been tested in different ways for COVID-19. And in a way, I think it's probably people are trying to taking this opportunity to get additional funding or generate a news flow. I'm not sure how many of those are really true innovative therapeutics for COVID-19. However, I do see a lot of new activities in COVID-19, but I don't think any of those, rather than it's a time for people to take advantage of the opportunity, fundamentally didn't change, right? Oncology companies still focus on oncology deals. Autoimmune still focus on autoimmune, and the industry, you can see the stock market for biotech is still very, very hot, not just for COVID-19 vaccine companies, but for all companies. So, and I think so. On the other hand, I think the activities in COVID-19 on the one side is taking some attention or resource away, but on the other hand, it's actually bringing a lot of probably attention to the industry, and potentially can also bring a lot of capital who were not thinking about healthcare and now thinking about investment in healthcare in general. So I think net, I think it's probably still a positive for all the sectors in the industry.
I agree with what Sean just said. Yeah. Our observation is there were some, like for example, some platform companies, and all of a sudden, they realized that their platform could also have, application in COVID-19. But companies usually stay focused on their main course, but they do, try to explore collaboration opportunities without deviating from the direction they are heading.
So, as an ophthalmology focused player, has any kind of operationally or like your development activities put on hold because of other, like, you know, your trials or other healthcare facilities focusing more or directing their resources more to, you know, combat this pandemic? Has that affected Santen's operations?
Yeah, so the ophthalmology field, especially some sub-segment of disease, like dry eye, for example, or cataract surgery. Those two areas especially a relatively heavy negative impact during the COVID-19 situation. So fortunately, the month June seems to be number of surgery go back to 85-90% level before COVID-19. But at the bottom, like April month, it's a less than 50% level. So those especially two areas was significant impact. But other area like glaucoma, so relatively, you know, severe this area is you know, relatively minor impact.
I see. Now I'm just jumping around because all these great responses and answers are I'm receiving these days. Sean, as you know, Everest Medicines and also maybe part of your portfolio companies at CBC, do you think more of like anti-infectives or kind of antibiotics deals around that, or would you think those relatively kind of people shied away from them because they were kind of, you know, not much innovation? It's kind of tough to do trials. Do you see any kind of increased attention going back to anti-infectives or antibiotic space again in terms of deal making?
Good question. So Everest actually, when we started this company 3 years ago, anti-infective had been one of the major therapeutic areas for us. We had a dedicated team with a chief medical officer who's an expert, world expert in anti-infective antibiotics. And out of the eight deals we did within Everest in the past 2.5 years, 3 are actually antibiotics. So it's a really an area for focus for us in the past, because we firmly believe this is a TA that had been almost neglected by the developed countries in the past couple of decades. And there are a lot of good drugs actually, both in antiviral and antibiotics. And so I'm not sure whether COVID. You can see that any company claim vaccine or therapeutics for COVID-19, they are getting a lot of attention from the capital market, that's for sure. But even some other antibiotic company, I do see the increased interest in them. And one example, actually, I'm not sure if I can mention the name, it's a public company, actually listed company in the US. I want to mention the name, but if you check, this company received biddings from 3 different buyers in the past few months. Just the valuation for the company increased. I mean, valuation is still small, but it's actually more than doubled or tripled in the past few months from 3 different buyers. So yeah, so you can say that maybe it's one indication that people are sensing that probably more interest, more value to be created in the field. Yeah.
That's great, and also the difficulty in developing vaccines and also manufacturing is a big challenge, and I do, you know, from the bottom of my heart, you know, respect all those challenging out there. So I guess according to your thoughts, that antibiotics and antiviral spaces will be receiving more interest in, like, how should I say, a just case for them because, again, previously a lot of people shied away from that space. So that's, I think it's a very positive side and also very important side of the healthcare community. Maybe I just want to shift gears a little bit on, because we have panelists from, who can talk for Chinese and also on the Japanese side of things. And this is about decision making. And Chinese companies are said to be quick on decision making, whereas Japanese have been, I guess, caricatured as very, taking their time, slow, don't know what's going on for a while. And I'm not saying that COVID-19 is going to change things in any way, but and I think first I'll ask you, Ken, because you've been at Santen and Takeda. Do you think there's going to be any change? Maybe perhaps the companies that you've been at or at are relatively quick, but do you think people would start thinking about, we got to speed up things a bit more because things are going digital? You can't make any excuses anymore, saying that, oh, it took me another extra day to travel from one place to another. How do you think people's decision making? Do you think it'll change or it won't, or maybe it'll take even longer?
Yeah, it's unfortunately in the case of Santen, we haven't seen any significant change pace of making. At the beginning, obviously, management was shocked. We need to stay at home. We cannot get together. However, in the case of Santen, we did relatively and quickly adapt the new environment. So the reason why is the Santen is global company. So even if before COVID-19, we usually take the phone or video with US colleague, European colleague, Singapore colleague. So we are very much accustomed for digital video usage. So just after 2-3 weeks, started the at-home situation, we could easily adapt the situation. And then now we conduct every management decision-making meeting or board meeting online or virtually. So and easy to catch up, connect with the top management. Hey, sir, how do you feel this decision? We can do or we should not do. So I don't see any significant change of decision-making pace either.
Wendy and Sean, do you think it's you guys are going to get even busier and trying to hold your people back from making even quicker decisions from your Chinese clients or your counterparts?
Yeah.
Now everything's digital. People expect you to respond on the spot.
Well, I would say, like the Chinese companies on the company side or on the investor side, usually the decisions are made very quickly. And in the past, people actually complained about Chinese regulatory hurdles. For example, if you have a partner or an investor from China who needs to have their investment converted from RMB into USD, then invest in the US, they have to go through the ODI approval, overseas direct investment approval, quite notorious. And it's very, it could be long. And one thing which is good coming out of the COVID-19 is actually the process is quicker now than in the past. I don't know why, and I suspect there are a few reasons. In the past, the process was more formal. You need to show up, you need to, hand in everything in person. Because of the pandemic, the Chinese government actually has relaxed a number of procedural requirements, and now it's accepting like a documentary evidence or virtual appearance, and also other than life sciences industry, deals in other industries have slowed down. So these two factors actually have made the ODI process much faster.
That's very interesting. I do recall talking to a lot of people trying to get stuff done, and my experience with dealing with Chinese business in China is that the regulations took forever, and you didn't. It's like a kind of a black box, and you always needed a friend at the NMPA or some the Ministry of Finance or something that when you can start bringing over the funds. But I guess that is a very positive phase. And before I ask Sean's comment on that, one thing about Japan as well, as conservative as in a very just sense, the PMDA, the Japanese regulator for healthcare and drugs, they are very conservative, but now they're allowing participants to join online because a lot of sponsors can't physically come over. They'll have their local CROs or consultants come in for the face-to-face consultation. We're sitting like 3 meters apart, so it's total social distance. But now they're allowing video participation. I mean, maybe a year ago, that would have been, I'm sorry, you have to come at this time, this place, and you got to be that person. But even in that sense, even for Japan, things are changing a little bit. But Sean, do you share Wendy's observation about the Chinese regulators?
Absolutely. I think on the operation side also, in China, actually, most companies are back to normal in terms of working together. And I see over the video, my colleagues in China, most of them, they're just having their meeting on a regular basis, and people are not wearing masks anymore even. So it's almost business back to normal, very different from other countries.
But on the other hand, I do hope, some of the changes, especially some of the changes on the government's regulatory side will stay.
Yeah, exactly. That was my question. I wanted to ask, and whether they put it back to the original, or just keep as is. But do you think it'll stay? I guess if things are convenient and if it's working, they'll find a reason to keep it. I won't say lax, but more convenient for many people. Or for China, do you think the regulators?
I think if everybody is going to accept that, video conferences, virtual appearances are acceptable alternatives.
We still have a little time, but one question about the U.S. and China, and nothing about politics or anything, but last year CFIUS played a big kind of impact on the industry, and well, looking back, I mean, I guess it hasn't really affected because it's kind of a rule that was, it's not fully enacted, and people don't really invest more than 20% in this as a company, so that doesn't really hit the bar. But do you think any kind of further strengthening of CFIUS, or would that really affect Chinese companies' deal kind of appetite going forward, or do you think that's not really going to affect anything? Wendy, your thoughts around CFIUS?
Yeah. Sean, do you want to go first? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I think CFIUS, I think it's as you mentioned, it's really focusing on company control in terms of investor, and also it's focused on biotechnology companies with relatively narrow definition. So actually quite of the, for example, I think a lot of the companies working on just small molecule drugs, which are most of them, and antibody companies, they're not affected at all. And so it's a more related to like cell therapy, gene therapy, genetic testing, those kinds of technologies. So I think in those, if you are trying to make a direct investment, obviously you have to file CFIs. So that's a, but if you are doing licensing, I think it's not relevant anyway. So I think it is has some impact, but I didn't see a huge impact. Even if people probably have to, I think what the positive of the regulation and the capital control is probably still more important than actually service. Yeah.
I just want to say, there's a fairly recent CFIUS case, which CFIUS ordered the divestiture or unwinding a transaction where a Chinese investor agreed to set up with a joint venture with a US medical device company. Normally, actually the JV would be out in China. So it's not investment by a foreign company into a US situation where CFIUS would have jurisdiction. It's a situation where the US company is going to set up joint venture in China to explore the Chinese market. Of course, and that would involve technology transfer to China. So after that decision, there were a lot of questions, a lot of concerns from in the industry, especially from the China side, and trying to find out if there's a change. So I actually have worked with my international trade partner on a number of cases, investments. I would say that particular CFIUS case, the medical device case, has its own special set of facts. So it can be, most of the time, it can be differentiated. But on the other hand, if you do want to, set up a JV with a Chinese investor involving technology transfer, do come to us and have a chat. Most likely, it's not an issue, but that's something you should have it analyzed.
Thank you. And we are about at our time. And again, I appreciate everybody participating, especially the panelists, and also the participants on today's webinar. For some, it could be just before dinner or during dinner. Also for some in Asia, early morning. I do appreciate everybody joining today. And so as a reminder again, the link to the recording will be sent to email to each participant. And if we didn't get to answer your questions, I think I was able to follow up on all the questions. But if you do have any follow-up questions, please feel free to send them over. And we'll try to do our best to respond. And again, we look forward to seeing you all in person. Virtual is fine, but nothing beats face-to-face. And but in the interim, please stay safe, social distance, and continue to do the great work that our industry does. And thank you again. And have a good evening and have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.